Hi everyone, my name is Sahar and I'm a PhD student at University of California, Riverside. Today I'm presenting our work enabling local secure computing on untrusted in-memory architectures. This is a joint work with Jingyao and our supervisor Elahe Sadreddini. So teams are getting more and more important, and it has been lots of efforts, both in academia and industry, to develop team architectures and the software stack that enables such architectures. There are some real-world teams out there for various purposes. For example, when it comes to machine learning accelerators, Samsung HBM is out there, and like GSI Gemini is an example of highly parallel data processing engine. Samsung Smart SSD is considered a reconfigurable hardware substrate as well. So using these PIMs to perform computation over the data requires the plain text to be present in the memory, and this exposes the data into some vulnerabilities. There has been less efforts to provide the security for PIMs. Thus, nowadays, security has become a first-class citizen in this area of research, of course, as well as performance. Okay, so now let's see what are these vulnerabilities that we're talking about. So trusted execution environments or TEs are proposed to ensure the confidentiality and integrity of sensitive data and codes. And the data within the TEE is like protected from attackers. Intel SGX and ARM Trust Zone are some examples of these TEs. So based on these TE threat models, all the off-chip components, including the standard DRAM and the PIM-enabled memory, are considered untrusted, which means that attackers might try to eavesdrop on the bus to get some information about the unencrypted data, or they might try to maliciously observe or modify the data outside the trusted boundary. Uh, they might try to launch cold boot attack on the memories to retrieve some information. And also, there can be a backdoor in the PIM-enabled memory, which injects fault into the computation. So because of all these, we need to provide data confidentiality, integrity, and verification scheme for PIMs. And this needs to be lightweight because we don't want to cancel out the benefits that we are getting from PIM. Okay, so to protect the data within PIM, we cannot use the conventional memory encryption schemes. And this is because we want to perform computation over the data, and it's not just about storing the data into the memory. So one way is to employ homomorphic encryption. It is true that HE enables computation over the ciphertext, but its high computational complexity and high bandwidth requirements results in 3 orders of magnitude slowdown compared to CPU insecure. So this definitely cancels out the benefits that we are getting from PIM. So the alternative solution can be including the PIM into the trusted boundary. So in that case, PIM can have access to the plain text securely. However, this requires the redesign of the PIM module, like introducing the root of trust and so many other changes. So again, the overhead here is going to be significant. The other approach is secure multi-party computing. So in this kind of works, usually we split the computation between different parties, and in that case, the computation is going to be performed securely on the data. So in this work, we're using MPC scheme to split the computation between PIM and the TEE in a way that the untrusted party is not able to get any information about the plaintext data with only having access to a share of the data that it has, right? Okay, so Yeah, the challenge here is how to balance the workload in a way that the computation on both of our computing elements does not become a computational bottleneck. So CPU is limited in bandwidth and memory is limited in computing capabilities. So CPU should be in charge of the compute intensive portion of the computation, and PIM should be in charge of the memory intensive portion. Okay, our prior work, second DP, tried to address this challenge by securely outsourcing the linear computation to the PIM. So they first encrypt the plain text using counter mode encryption, in which they mask the data with one-time paths. Okay, and then this encrypted data is stored in the PIM. During the runtime, kernel computation is performed over the ciphertext on the PIM. And at the same time, the same computation is performed over the data on the TEE, which is the one-time paths. Okay, so these one-time paths are generated on the fly, so there is no need for data communication between memory and the TEE to perform the computation over those one-time paths. At the end, when the PIM results are retrieved to the TEE, uh, we are ready to merge these two results, these two partial results together to get the final result of our computation. Okay, but still there are some challenges here. First of all, it is true that we don't need to transfer the one-time paths from memory to the CPU to perform computation over them. But still, we need to transfer public data to the memory to perform the computation. And sometimes this might incur lots of overhead. Okay. Also, they do not support nonlinear computation, while there are lots of like operations out there and applications that requires nonlinear computation to be performed on the PIM. Uh, also, they're just relying on simulation, but not real-world hardware. So, to further elaborate the first issue, let's consider GenV kernel, in which we have a matrix and a vector as inputs. So this figure presents the speed up of second DP, our prior work, compared to insecure CPU implementation. This blue line here is when the matrix is private and vector is public, and the red line is when the vector is private and the matrix is public. So our observation shows that our prior work does not perform optimal when the amount of public data increases or exceeds that of the private data, because there are still there's still huge amount of public data which needs to be transferred to the CPU for the computation. Okay, so in our proposed model, we are trying to balance the computation between the TE and PIM using MPC, and also by adopting pre-computation on the TE whenever possible. We are trying to reduce the CPU overhead during the runtime. Also, we are supporting nonlinear computation in addition to linear computation by switching to Yaw's garbage sharing. Also, we are implementing and evaluating our scheme using real-world PIM hardware, Optimum. However, our approach is applicable to any other PIM architecture out there. So overall, our proposed method enables low overhead data confidentiality, integrity, and verification scheme for both linear and nonlinear operations for real-world PIMs. Okay, so in our setup, we are considering that the system is equipped with both standard and the PIM-enabled memory. And the data by default is presented on the standard memory, and it will be transferred to the PIM-enabled memory whenever it is required for the computation. Okay, so given that, let's start with the high-level our high-level security scheme. Okay, so in general, our scheme starts with data encryption. Before computation starts, the encrypted data is stored in the memory, in the standard memory. This data is brought to the TEE to be decrypted and be masked with one-time pads using counter mode encryption to generate the ciphertext. This ciphertext is stored in the standard memory to be used in the computation during the runtime. Okay. So then whenever it is possible, we pre-compute the kernel computation on the one-time pads on the TEE to get the partial results of the TEE portion of the computation. Okay, and then this result is securely stored in the standard memory for our future use during the runtime. Okay, so at the runtime, we float the ciphertext to the PIM to perform computation over them. When the computation over the ciphertext is done, we will have to uh, like we will have the other portion of the computation results ready. So the first portion was the one which was pre-computed, and the second portion is going to be the one which is already performed on the PIM. Then at the same time, the TEE pre-computed partial results are decrypted on the TEE. Okay, and when both of these two results are ready on the TEE, we will merge them to get the final result of our computation. Okay, just one note here is that whenever the pre-computation is not supported, we perform the kernel computation on the TEE and the PIM in parallel during the runtime. Okay, so if we want to perform nonlinear function, when we are done with the first part of the computation, which was the linear part, we need to switch to YAWS sharing to be able to offload the nonlinear computation to the PIM. In this case, the garblet circuit for the specific function, for example, sigmoid, needs to be generated on the TEE and be shared with PIM. So then both of our parties can input their encrypted data to the circuit to have the final result of the computation. Okay, so when we are done also with the nonlinear part of the computation, the rest is like the same scenario as before, like performing the rest of computation, linear computation, and then merging the results from PIM and TEE on the TEE side to get the final result. So whenever we retrieve the data from PIM, we need to verify the computation as well to make sure that there was no fault injected into the computation. Okay, to verify the computation performed on the PIM, we are using message authentication codes, which is a method in which we are generating some tags for each block of the data. These tags are used to verify the computation. To generate these tags for each block, tags for each block of the plain text, we are using linear checksum. Okay, so when we generated the tags using this linear checksum, we just need to mask these tags with one-time pads, and then from now on, after having the ciphertext for tags, we just treat them the same as data. So we perform the computation over them, we get the partial results, and then we merge them. And the final tag here can be used to verify the computation. Okay, so we've evaluated our scheme using 20 optimum PIMs, and this provides us with more than 2,000 data, like DPUs, and also it gives us access to 160 gigabytes of memory. We evaluated our scheme using some data-intensive applications like MLP, DLRM, logistic regression, and linear regression. Here, uh, I'm just giving you some insights about our results of MLP and the logistic regression, and the rest can be found in our paper. Okay, so we're comparing our work with three other baselines. First of all, CPU insecure is the insecure implementation of each application on the CPU, only using CPU. And then CPU secure is the TEE-based implementation of each application. Optimum insecure is the implementation of each application using Optimum with no security consideration. And then Optimum secure is our scheme with and without pre-computation stage. So first of all, since we used VM-based TEs, CPU secure didn't present a lot of overhead compared to CPU insecure. Okay, and offloading the computation to the Optimum results in significant reduction in execution time, specifically for larger data sets, as you can see here. Okay, so Optimum Secure, our implementation, achieves up to 15 times speed up over CPU Secure, and it demonstrated minimal performance overhead compared to Optimum Insecure. Um, just one note here is that the runtime scheme here had like huge amount of public data involved, and that's why we didn't get any like performance benefits uh, without having pre-computation stage. And overall, our verification scheme for all of our applications, it was negligible. So for logistic regression, again, we are having the same kind of baselines, but here we're having two different implementations for Optimum and Secure. One of them is the LUT based, and the other one is non-LUT based implementation of the activation function. So in addition to Optimum Secure A, which is the like here, this Optimum Secure A is our implementation when we are only performing linear computation on the PIM, and this A2Y version is when we are having both linear and nonlinear computation on the PIM. Okay, so now, as you can see, we are getting the same pattern for the execution time. And by performing nonlinear functions on the PIM and closer to the optimums, closer to the data or the like inside the PIM, we are getting definitely better execution time, as you can see here. And overall, Optimum Secure achieves 5 times speed up compared to CPU Secure. However, it experiences a 6 times slowdown compared to Optimum Insecure when we are having a LUT-based implementation for the activation function. But it's worth mentioning that we are achieving 4 times speed up compared to Optimum Insecure when we are having the non-LUT-based implementation of the activation function on the P. Okay, so yeah, overall, our scheme tries to balance the workload between TE and PIM to accelerate computation up to 15 times while preserving the privacy and integrity of the computation and the data. So we are also supporting both linear and nonlinear operations by switching between different MPC schemes, and we are also enabling low overhead verification using linear checksum. Uh, yeah, Thank you.